reason why we're here today is because there are two events going on right now in Vermont. There's the Vermont Sampler Initiative, which started here in Vermont back in 2022. And then this year, the state is doing the 250th anniversary of the start of the revolution back in 1775. So two things are going on, and we just thought it would be nice to kind of combine the two. And so we have pulled together what I'm calling a sampler driving tour. And in 20 different, I'll talk about this a lot at the end of the presentation. But basically there are 20 different places all over the state where you can see 20 different exhibits. And each sampler that's on exhibit, like here at the Dorset Library, each sampler has been researched to find a Revolutionary War ancestor. So that's how these two events are tying together. Every sampler has been researched to find a Revolutionary War ancestor. Okay, so this is the outline of what I'm going to talk to you about for the next hour or so. An introduction to what the Sampler Archive is all about. I have some Vermont Sampler Initiative statistics for you because we've been doing this since 2022. Almost 800 samplers have been found and documented, and so we're able to pull together a few summary statistics for you. What do we know since 2022? We're going to look at some cultural values, and what I mean by that is what were the girls learning as they were stitching on their samplers, okay? And this is a little bit, I'm sort of practicing on you because I'm going to be hitting that message hard at the Summer Teachers Institute at the Bennington Museum, where I'm one of the presenters of that course that they teach down there at the Bennington Museum every year. And this year I'll be speaking in July 31st. So I'm a little bit practicing on you that topic of the cultural values. And then finally winding up with a little more detail about I'm calling it the Bennington to Brownington 2025 Sampler Driving Tour. And I call it that because in my head, only in my head, I have it starting in Bennington in the southwest corner of Vermont and ending in Brownington way up in the northeast corner. Okay, and before we go too much further, is this what most people think of when they think of a sampler, do you think? A very basic piece of embroidery? Yeah. With letters of the alphabet on it. Sometimes the girl's name is on it. So this is a very basic one of, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. All done in cross stitch. And can you see she stitched her name after she did uppercase block letters. Then she did a set of alphabet letters that's lowercase. Can you see that? The lowercase. And then she starts a paragraph of text. Amelia Barrows is my name. English is my nation. Dorset is my dwelling place. This is the only Dorset sampler we've found in the whole project. And does anybody know how the verse is supposed to be finished? This is supposed to be a 4-line text. And we find this over and over again, by the way. This is a very common little piece of poetry that we have found in many, many Vermont samplers. It's finished, I guess either she lost interest or her family said, hey, enough of that, we need you doing more farm chores. But it's finished by saying, and Christ is my salvation. Okay? You find that's one of the values that keeps popping up over and over again is our ancestors really were faith-based people. Yeah. Sue.
English is my nation. Dorset, is this from England, not from here?
This is from here. This is from Dorset. Yeah.
English is my nation.
I don't know why.
But there is a place called Dorset in England.
Yeah, but her uncle was experienced Barrows. Founded the Barrows house.
Oh, Barrows, I see.
But it was bought locally, right, Glenn? Yeah, we know this is. We happen to see this is where provenance and owner information is really key.
All right, thanks.
I have always wondered though, were they supposed to be stitching England is my nation?
Yes,
I'm wondering about that. And I also looked close at this to see if there was a British crown stitched on here, and I don't think there is. No. I don't believe there is. Yeah.
English is
so
my
sometimes.
language.
English is my language. Yep. Yeah, yep. Who knows who the instructor was, right? So this is the case where when the girl hasn't given us any dates to go by, we would go onto Ancestry.com, right, and plug in Amelia Barrows and just try Dorset, Vermont, and see what you get.
1841.
Where do you?
The Duxbury.
I'm sorry, that's my error. I should have deleted that because
Okay.
actually I have the Emily Ward sampler on exhibit. That's my error. I'm sorry for the confusion on that. Okay, so why do we do this? Why do we document? Why is it a thing that we want to do? Well, Sarah Emery, in her Reminiscences of a Nonagenarian written in 1879, wrote, "One was considered very poorly educated who could not exhibit a sampler. Some of these were large and elaborate specimens of handiwork, framed and glazed meaning a piece of glass over the front, right? They often formed the chief ornament of the sitting room or the best chamber in the house." So in other words, a sampler was a way for the family to show off that A, they could afford to have an educated daughter in the family, and B, if there were any young men who came courting and were meeting in the front room, they could see that this was a family who could afford to have an educated daughter, and this was an educated young woman they thought they were interested in courting. Okay, so the Sampler Archive is online. You can find it at www.samplerarchive.org. It's all over the world. Any researcher in the whole world can look at this website. The tabs on the right are where you can click on and find more information than you ever thought was possible to know about a piece of artwork. Okay, and so what is it? Somebody asked me just yesterday at a talk, well, how did this get started? This is a project of the Sampler Consortium, and that's a group of educators, frankly, who wanted to know more about girls' education. How did girls and women in the early years of our country become educated people? And so the Sampler Consortium was started to document samplers and other embroideries made by schoolgirls in what is now the United States. Purpose is to share this information all over the world, to acknowledge the work of girls and young women who created these artifacts, and to further the work of historians all over the world to understand the education and lives of our American ancestors. And this sampler that you're seeing right here is from the Historical Society across the road. And there's the British crown motif. Did you notice that? Before I floated it in? Hanging on the end of the branch of the tree
Oh, yeah.
was the British crown. And so this was done by Julia Holden, age 10, in 1806. And she has the motif of the British crown that she's learning how to stitch. Okay, so as I was saying, we've had, beginning in November of 2022 at the Bennington Museum, we had our first Sampler ID Day, the first one in Vermont. So this is a nationwide effort. The Sampler Consortium has already documented samplers in Delaware and Rhode Island. They've done one county in New York State, and it came to Vermont in November of 22. Since then, we've been at all of these other sites, and we will be at the Woodstock History Center in a couple of weeks, Friday, July 18th. And this is the advertisement for that. This is the flyer that I gave to you, advertising exactly that event, the Woodstock History event.
Can you register your sampler, or do you have to be there in person?
You can register it. That's what the, see here, it says, or choose our new email registration option. So send an email. This is the project director's personal email. Send a message to her and tell her what you'd like to do, and she'll tell you how to do it exactly. Yeah, good question. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on now to some sampler initiative statistics. Another very lovely, much more advanced sampler now, right, than the two previous ones that I showed you already. Now we've got more colorful work going on. Now the girl is learning. The ABCs are still there, right? They're a little faded up here, but you've got your uppercase capital here, uppercase cursive actually right here, uppercase block letters here, and lowercase block letters here. And this is the value that she learned and was thinking about the whole time she was stitching. Behold this work wrought by my hand, all, what is it? Praise to my Creator. Yep. There is nothing, this is a little bit odd, there is nothing so curious here as things that are formed by nature. I'm not quite sure what she had in mind there, right? But again, acknowledging her Creator. And the ornament, she's learning some ornamental stitching now. As you can see, she's learning some architectural motifs and trees across the bottom and a very nice floral band around the three sides. And you can imagine that now she might be ready to start doing ornamental stitching on clothing, right? That might be the next step. Okay, so here are some summaries. This is what we know now. Since November of 22, we have documented 787 samplers. 588 are American. Only 457 have been made in Vermont. But because this is a national effort, right, the Sampler Consortium goes over the whole world, and especially the whole country, we want to document them all. People have moved to Vermont, right? People leave Vermont. Whatever samplers are here in Vermont, we want to document them. The unfortunate part is that 25% we don't know where they were made or what time they were made, because girls didn't always stitch that onto their samplers. Sometimes they stitched their name and told us they were 10 years old, and that's it. They don't tell us when they were 10 years old. They didn't tell us what town they were from, and so that's why we have 25%, we have to say, are unknown. We really don't know where they were from, unfortunately. Okay, let's look at when most of them were made. As you can see, most of them that we have found so far were made in the 1820 to 29 decade. After that, what you're noticing is the numbers decrease because girls started going to public schools. Okay, up until then, 1770 to 1799 and 1800 to 1809, you're talking about private education. You're talking about individual women who maybe had in their front parlor, maybe they would have a group of students come in, and she taught them needlework at that time. She taught them plain needlework, plain stitching, so that they could learn to stitch clothing pieces together. And then the ornamental stitching, like with samplers, was also part of that education. And so up until what we've learned is up until about 1829, that most samplers are evidence that that's what girls were learning. And then after 1829, they were allowed more and more and more to go to school. And so learning how to do needlework fell off in importance. Okay, and the age of Vermont sampler makers, we have learned that most of them that we have found so far were aged 10 to 12. And you might say that as their teenage years went on, they had to do more and more housework participating, helping out with the farmsteads, helping out raising younger children. When the mother of the family died and there were young children to be cared for, the girls had to step in almost in loco parentis kind of thing. And then obviously once they got married, they had very little time to do fancy, beautiful needlework like this one. Okay, let's start looking now at some of the cultural values, some of those blocks of stitching that they also learned after they learned their basic ABCs, right? The goal of learning their ABCs, of course, was to theoretically help them learn to read. Theoretically, they knew how to read after they knew their ABCs. They could now spell their own name. When it came to signing documents, they could now, instead of just signing with an X, they were supposed to be able to sign with their own name. And then they also learned perhaps a block of text. And all of this had to do with inculcating moral behavior in these girls, because after all, they were being raised to be wives and mothers, right? So ideas such as being faith-based, having delayed gratification, delayed until the afterlife, perseverance, hard work, endurance, virtue, the importance of a virtuous life, and mental beauty as opposed to physical beauty, the value of education, especially with the Vermont samplers, and especially in New England, if they were made in New England, we're finding great emphasis on the value of education. And that life and beauty is short, and the shadow of death was always with them. I like this sampler in particular. Now, this is one where this falls into that category of 25%, where we don't know who made this or what time period. But I really like this piece of poetry, which is attributed to a British poet. Right? Are we clear on that, Sue? This is Sue's sampler, exactly. We've decided it was a British poet who wrote this. But I like the text, the value here. I ask not, wish not to appear more beauteous, rich, or gay, but to be wiser every year and better every day. And so I think it's a really good example of the kind of virtuous behavior that we were encouraging girls to practice, to assimilate, and then practice in their lives, even though we don't know the name of the girl, and we don't know where she was from, and we don't know exactly what year this was made. This is actually, I'm calling this a sampler fragment because the bottom edge of the sampler has been cut off. So it's very possible that her name and date and all was located further down and was cut off. Maybe it was damaged. Who knows? We don't know that part of its history. So the Callie Respuzzi, who's the collections manager down at the Bennington Museum, wrote this for their exhibit, which is going on right now. And I hope you have a chance to get down to see it. It's a really lovely exhibit. One wonderful thing that has happened since 2022 is we have discovered there are two major collectors of just Vermont samplers here in Vermont. They're both elderly gentlemen who started buying Vermont samplers 20 to 30 years ago. They're both quite elderly. One of them has about 88 Vermont samplers, just Vermont samplers, and the other one has about 93. Just Vermont samplers. Yeah, they're better than any of the museums in the state. You know what I mean? Fortunately, they're both thinking about their estate and where these collections are going next. But anyway,
Are any of these people in the room?
are they in the room?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Nobody here is that old. Right, Glenn? Nobody here is that old. But anyway, Callie said it so well. Callie, the collections manager at the Bennington Museum, I just couldn't do it, couldn't have said it any better. So this is how she had to say about the values that the girls were incorporating into their lives and into their stitching. Girl samplers reflect what the young United States of America aspired to become, a virtuous republic full of educated and industrious people. Vermont became the 14th state in 1791, a time when the success of the American experiment was in no way guaranteed. Education was understood to be the foundation of a successful democracy. But the role of women and their education was hotly debated. So stitch samplers were created by girls as lessons in needlework, literacy, and moral behavior. Like all schoolwork, they reflect the values of the society in which they were made. So let's look at some more blocks of text and what these girls stitched. So here's a lovely sampler by Rachel Armenia Spalding. She did this in 1830. She lived to be 64. And she learned and wants us to know, this is another very common prayer. Jesus, permit thy gracious name to stand with the first efforts of a youthful hand, and whilst my fingers o'er this canvas move, engage my tender heart to seek thy love. With thy dear children let me share a part, and write thy name, thyself, upon my heart. Very common. We see this over and over again. So somebody actually asked me, where do these girls get these? Did they think this up? No. Their teachers had Bibles, they had books of poetry, they had novels. So these phrases that the girls were stitching came from the teachers that they had. Harriet Bullard did this at age 12. She lived to be 79. She was in Sherburne at the time. And she stitched for us, let virtue prove your never-ending bloom, for mental beauties will survive the tomb. And wrought by Harriet Bullard, age 12. So this is what I meant when I said the shadow of death was always with them. I mean, I think we all know, right? women used to die early and young, right? Very often leaving their daughters to be the heads of the households. Okay, so Mary Jarvis stitched this in 1820. All right, so here's an example. This is the kind of example of all the information I keep to one page of all these girls. Okay, Mary Pepperell Sparhawk Jarvis was born in 1809 in Lisbon, Portugal. Her parents were William Jarvis and his wife, Mary Pepperell Sparhawk. Mary was actually the niece of William's mother, which makes her some sort of cousin of William's. Both William and Mary were descendants of Sir William Pepperell of Massachusetts. They had married in 1808 in Portugal, while William was serving in the Thomas Jefferson administration as agricultural consul. Mary died 2 years later, back in Massachusetts, after delivering 2 daughters to William. He remarried soon afterwards and sired 10 more children, half-siblings to Mary, the sampler maker. The eldest son of this union volunteered in the Civil War, was wounded at New Bern, North Carolina, died, and is buried there. At age 20, the sampler maker, Mary married Hampton Cutts of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Harvard class of 1823. Hampton eventually earned the title Judge Cutts, so we can presume that they led a very comfortable life. Together they produced 9 children, only 4 of whom lived to adulthood. Her husband was an attorney, farmer, and served in both the House and Senate, Vermont House and Senate. Mary herself was recognized in an era when women were more often seen than heard. She wrote and published a book on the life of her father, The Life and Times of Honorable William Jarvis of Wethersfield, Vermont. She was a member of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. Does that ring a bell with anybody? The Mount Vernon Ladies Association? That's the group that bought Mount Vernon, George Washington's Mount Vernon, and brought it back from rack and ruin. She was the Vermont delegate to that effort. So William Jarvis was an eminently successful man, being most noted as the man who imported 3,500 prize merino sheep raised in Spain. The sheep were from Spain. He brought the sheep to the U.S. during a difficult time for trade with Europe, sold them to interested breeders, and transformed the wool industry in Vermont. These sheep were famous because their fleece was so much heavier than normal sheep. It gave you a fleece of about 3 to 4 pounds, and these were significantly more. These are Vermont sheep. As for the Revolutionary War service, Charles Jarvis, Mary's grandfather, served as, quote, a zealous patriot during the Revolution. He was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in 1788 and a member of the Massachusetts legislature until 1798. And he was leader of the local chapter of the Jeffersonian Party. On Mary's maternal side, her maternal grandfather, Nathaniel Sparhawk, was colonel of the 7th Worcester County Regiment. This unit marched to reinforce the army under General Stark at Bennington in August 1777. He resigned his commission in 1779 after 5 years of service to help settle his deceased brother's affairs. He's buried at Kittery Point, Maine, along with his wife Elizabeth. And this sampler that I just showed you is a very good example of why you need an estate plan for any of your valuables, if you have a collection that you've been working on. This was bought off eBay with a huge history that I just told you about, was bought off eBay. It's at the Vermont Historical Society now. I don't know if they had to buy it or somebody bought it off eBay and donated it to them. But, I mean, can you imagine that, having something in your family with that kind of history and nobody wants it? Send it to eBay. We'll try to sell it, see if we can get anything for it. So this is by Amanda Ellis. Now, what do you notice right away that's different about this one? This one looks really different, right?
No color.
This is not a woven piece of linen anymore. This is punched paper, right? So this is one of those punched paper samplers that she did in, what did she say, 1848. So this must have been the latest and the greatest of technology at the time. It became much more popular in the post-Civil War era. I'm sure you've seen them. I'm sure you've seen them at just about every auction house or every antique shop anywhere. They tend to be oblong this way, and they'll say "Home Sweet Home," you know, something like that. That's the kind of Victorian style that became very popular. But originally, when this kind of technology made punched paper like this available, they were used for things like this. So Amanda Ellis did this. Both of her parents had died. Her parents, Stephen and Abigail, both died in 1848. Her mother was 39. I couldn't find that they died of the same thing, so I don't know that they died together or if they died of the same thing, but they did both die in 1848, leaving Amanda an orphan at age 11. So Amanda wrote, "Adorn your heart, adorn your mind with knowledge of the purest kind." Okay? Nice girl, I think. Okay, and Harriet Lucina Carpenter only lived to be 32, but she likewise, her family had the resources to be able to employ an instructor so that she was able to stitch not just the basic sampler, but she's learning the ornamental stitching now that goes around 3 sides. And she stitched for us, "Life is the time to serve the Lord." Now maybe she was sick when she already did this and knew she was going to die early. That crossed my mind, that she knew in advance she was not going to be here long. And so she decided, I'm not going to put it off, right? Life, right now, is the time to serve the Lord. Sometimes the girls gave us a whole lot of information. What their name was, when they were born, how many years, how old they were when they did it, and their instructor's name, their parents' names. And this was her general grandfather in her background who founded Waitsville, Vermont. That's why I have the map there of showing you where Waitsville is and the picture of her great-grandfather that I found online. Okay, Abigail Wilder's sampler. Now this one is one that you will see on view at the Bennington Museum exhibit. She also only lived to be 32, but a very beautiful sampler. Again, silk embroidery on a linen background. And she wants us to know this sampler was wrought by Abigail Wilder of Ludlow, 14 years of age, September 1820. "Man's life is like a morning flower, cut down and withered in an hour." And then she tells us Chloe Wilder was her teacher, her preceptress. That's a word for her teacher. So I'm thinking, especially with this one, she had a premonition, or she had been suffering for years and knew that she was going to be not long for this world. And I'm thinking that's why she was encouraged to write this kind of verse. Okay, and Susan Ormsby of Bradford, who lived to be 93 actually, wants us to know, "Knowledge, virtue, truth, and grace. These are robes of richest dress." Right? There's kind of a theme going on here, right? Moral behavior, virtue, emphasis on the hereafter. And Abby Keith of Sheldon wants us to know. Oh, these are two together, very, very common. We see this over and over again. "Count that day lost, whose low descending sun views from thy hand no worthy action done." Right? So make your time, use your time well. "And remember thy Creator in the days of thy youth." We see those two over and over again. Okay, this is an interesting one by Lucretia Maria Walbridge. This came out of, it's interesting, I'm including this partly because I think the history of what happened to this sampler is so interesting. Her 2 older brothers, her parents, her grandparents were all born in Bennington. But by the time she was born, the family had started their western migration. So she was born in western New York State. She got married further west in Illinois. She died further west in Missouri at age 23. She had a 2-year-old daughter, left her widower with a 2-year-old daughter. And the family took her sampler with them and kept the migration going, and the family ended up in San Francisco. So to me, it's just fascinating that this kind of history, we know that people migrated west, right? Once the Erie Canal opened up, there was this giant sucking sound, right, of Vermonters moving west with their sheep, right? So that's partly why I included this sampler, because I thought the history was so fascinating. And she stitched for us, "Youth, when devoted to the Lord, is pleasing in his eyes. A flower, though offered in the bud, is no vain sacrifice." Okay, so I'm including this sampler. There isn't any virtuous block of text here, but I think this is the saddest history I've discovered in all the samplers that I've researched. This was done by Cordelia Burrows, age 9, in Kirby, Vermont. In case you don't know where Kirby is, it's way up there in the Northeast Kingdom. That's kind of what it looks like today. Let me tell you about Cordelia Burrows. Cordelia Burrows was born in Kirby in 1827, the only child born to Horace Burrows and Sybil Spaulding. Horace was from Walpole, New Hampshire, just down the Connecticut River from Kirby, and Sybil was from St. Johnsbury, not far from Kirby. They had married in 1821 in St. Johnsbury, and Cordelia was born 6 years later when they had moved to Kirby. Horace's parents were Zebulon Burrows and Hannah Rust. Zebulon was born in Hartford, Connecticut. Hannah was from Windsor, Connecticut. They had married in 1782, not long after Zebulon's Revolutionary War service. The first record we have for him is dated July 4th, 1776, as a private with Wolcott's Militia Regiment in Connecticut. The next year, he enlisted again, this time for 3 years, with George Washington's Continental Army from July 1777 through August 1780. And this was with Connecticut's 9th Regiment, which saw service as far away as Morristown, New Jersey. We find him serving again in 1781, this time for 78 days with Olcott's Vermont Regiment, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Ebenezer Walbridge. Didn't I just tell you about General Walbridge? September to November 1781, out of Bennington. After his war service, Zebulon and Hannah married and eventually moved up river to Kirby, where they lived out their lives. Theirs was a farming family, 2 sons, 1 daughter. Zebulon lived to the age of 85, Hannah lived to be 81, and they're both buried in the South Kirby Cemetery. As for Cordelia, she married Luther Russell. This is the picture of a very sad man. This man saw a lot of pain. She married Luther Russell in 1848 at age 21, becoming the first of his 4 wives. Together, they had 5 children, one of whom died in infancy, and the others died during a diphtheria epidemic which hit northern Vermont during the 19th century. The year 1862 was especially bad for Luther. On October 18th, Cordelia and their 21-day-old infant died. Over the following 8 days, Luther's 2 other young sons, his 13-year-old daughter, and finally his 17-year-old sister, who had come to help out during the sickness, also died. Luther was left with no family. Luther regrouped, married 3 more times, producing a total of 8 children, and he died in 1905 at age 79. Isn't that an incredible story? I mean, we just don't hear stories like that anymore, right?
No.
Okay, so that's what I have for you in terms of cultural values and stories. Let me tell you a little bit more now about the sampler driving tour that you can go on today, because all of the exhibits in all 20 sites are installed right now. There's the map. There's the handout right there for you if you prefer. Giving thanks to all these folks.